The winter of 1944–45 brought a deadly cold to the Ardennes forest, transforming the landscape into a frozen wasteland. Trees stood silent and heavy with snow, their branches weighed down by ice while the ground disappeared beneath a thick, unbroken blanket of white. The air itself seemed to freeze, biting at exposed skin and chilling even the bravest soldiers to the bone. Snow blanketed the land and temperatures plunged to -20 degrees Celsius, sometimes even lower at night. The relentless cold seeped into every crevice, making even the simplest tasks, like eating or writing a letter home, painful and difficult. The world was muffled and still, but danger lurked everywhere. For the soldiers, this was no winter wonderland. It was a white hell, a place where every breath stung and every step was a struggle. Faces were gaunt and eyes hollow, as exhaustion and cold took their toll. The Battle of the Bulge would unfold here, with men fighting not just the enemy, but the relentless cold. The snow muffled the sounds of battle, but the fear and tension were ever present, as soldiers braced themselves against both bullets and blizzards. Standard-issue uniforms and boots offered little protection. Foxholes became icy tombs, filling with snow and water that froze solid overnight. Many men shivered uncontrollably, unable to sleep, their bodies pressed together for warmth. The cold was a weapon in itself, jamming guns, freezing vehicles, and sapping strength from even the most determined troops. Rifles became useless, and tanks were immobilized by ice, leaving soldiers exposed and vulnerable. Many Allied units were unprepared, lacking proper clothing and supplies. Thin jackets and worn boots offered little defense against the bitter wind, and food was often scarce or frozen solid. Survival became a daily struggle, with frostbite and hypothermia as deadly as bullets. Medics worked tirelessly to save men's hands and feet, but many would suffer permanent injuries or lose limbs to the cold. The Ardennes offensive tested human endurance against nature's most brutal force, pushing every man to his absolute limit. In the white hell of winter, 1944, survival itself became a victory. Frostbite is the freezing of body tissue, a silent, creeping injury that can strike without warning. It's a condition that has haunted soldiers and explorers for centuries, often with devastating consequences. When exposed to extreme cold, the body's natural instinct is to protect its vital organs. It does this by cutting blood flow to the fingers, toes, nose, and ears, areas most distant from the heart. This process helps keep the core warm, but it comes at a cost. This survival mechanism leaves extremities dangerously vulnerable. As temperatures drop, ice crystals begin to form inside the cells, physically tearing them apart and causing irreversible damage at the microscopic level. Early signs, numbness, tingling, and waxy pale skin, are easy to miss, especially in the chaos and distraction of battle. Soldiers might not even realize they're in danger until it's too late. If exposure continues, the affected tissue begins to die. Skin turns white or blue, becomes hard, and loses all feeling. In severe cases, the damage is permanent, sometimes requiring amputation. Soldiers, often forced to remain immobile for hours or even days, exhausted and unable to keep moving, became prime targets for frostbite's relentless grip. Wet boots, soaked socks, and bare hands gripping freezing metal equipment only made matters worse, accelerating the onset of frostbite. Malnutrition and dehydration weakened the body's defenses even further, making soldiers more susceptible to the cold's deadly effects. Frostbite didn't announce itself with pain or warning. It quietly disabled thousands, leaving them unable to fight or even walk. In the trenches, frostbite was a constant, invisible threat, always lurking, always ready to strike when vigilance slipped. The cold stalked the battlefield, claiming victims without a sound, leaving behind a legacy of suffering and loss that shaped the course of history. Winter warfare's toll was staggering, especially on the Eastern Front and in the Ardennes. The bitter cold was not just a backdrop, but a relentless force that shaped the fate of entire armies. Soldiers faced not only enemy fire, but the constant threat of freezing temperatures that could kill as swiftly as a bullet. In Russia, German troops faced -40 degrees with inadequate gear, over 250,000 frostbite cases in one winter, 14,000 amputations. Many soldiers wore summer uniforms, their boots and gloves offering little protection. The cold seeped into every trench and shelter, turning simple tasks into life-or-death struggles. For many, the fight for survival was against the elements as much as the enemy. The cold halted armies as effectively as any enemy. Vehicles froze solid, weapons jammed, and supply lines broke down. Soldiers found themselves immobilized, unable to advance or retreat, trapped by snowdrifts and ice. In the Battle of the Bulge, American troops rushed to the front, lacked insulated boots and gloves. Many arrived unprepared for the sudden, deep freeze, forced to improvise with whatever clothing they could find, wrapping their feet in rags or newspapers. Weeks in wet foxholes led to rampant frostbite and trench foot. Soldiers stood for hours in icy water, their feet numb and swollen, unable to dry out or warm up. The pain was excruciating, and many could barely walk. Of 75,000 U.S. casualties, 15,000 were from the cold alone. Hospitals overflowed with men suffering from frostbite, hypothermia, and other cold-related injuries. The medical staff struggled to keep up as the wounded kept coming. Seeing comrades lose limbs was demoralizing, a reminder that winter was as deadly as any foe. The psychological toll was immense as soldiers realized that survival depended as much on luck and preparation as on courage. The lesson was clear: underestimate the cold, and you pay in lives. Commanders began to stress winter training and proper equipment, but for many these lessons came too late. Winter was a merciless adversary, indifferent to bravery or strategy. In the end, it claimed thousands, leaving a legacy of suffering and loss that haunted survivors long after the snow had melted. Armies learned that discipline and knowledge were the best defense against frostbite. Layering clothing trapped heat better than heavy coats. Foot care became ritual, dry socks, massaging feet, and keeping them warm. The buddy system saved lives. Soldiers checked each other for early signs of frostbite. Movement was essential. Even small exercises in foxholes kept blood flowing. Commanders rotated men off static duty to prevent cold injuries. These habits, layering, foot care, buddy checks, movement, became doctrine. Survival depended on vigilance, teamwork, and relentless attention to detail. The war against the cold was won by discipline, not technology. When cut off from supplies, soldiers improvised to survive. Huddling together for warmth, they shared blankets and body heat. Clothing was stuffed with straw, newspapers, or leaves for insulation. Boots were wrapped in rags or sandbags, anything to keep feet from freezing. Small fires, heated stones, and even breath warmed frozen limbs. Abandoned vehicles yielded seat cushions for insulation. Enemy gear was prized. Every scrap became a tool for survival. Ingenuity and desperation turned the debris of war into lifelines. Treating frostbite at the front was agonizing and grim. Rapid rewarming in warm water was the best hope, but excruciatingly painful. As blood returned, nerves screamed with pain. Medics used morphine when they could. Infection was a constant threat. Gangrene could mean amputation. Medics cleaned wounds, used antiseptics, and wrapped limbs, but resources were scarce. Surgeons waited for clear lines between living and dead tissue before amputating. For many, waking up without hands or feet was a life-changing trauma. Medical teams fought a different battle, one of pain, infection, and impossible choices. In the cold, a soldier's body burns calories like a furnace. High-fat, high-calorie foods, bacon, cheese, chocolate, became essential. Without enough fuel, men weakened quickly, risking frostbite and exhaustion. Water was just as vital. Dehydration thickened blood and increased cold injuries. Canteens froze, and melting snow was slow and risky. Soldiers kept water close to their bodies and forced themselves to drink regularly. Eating snow was forbidden. It dropped core temperature dangerously. Well-fed, hydrated soldiers stood a better chance against the cold. The hard lessons of WWII's frozen battlefields shaped modern survival. Layering, foot care, and the buddy system are now standard for anyone facing the cold. Advances in clothing, nutrition, and medical care all trace back to wartime necessity. Every extra sock packed for a hike echoes a soldier's ordeal in the Ardennes. Frostbite treatment and cold-weather nutrition remain rooted in these experiences. The suffering of those soldiers forged knowledge that saves lives today. Their sacrifice endures in every survival manual and every winter expedition.